listening to the 14th Source for all geeky nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I'm D. Bethel.
And I am Kyrun Silva.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, February 9th, 2024. And we've got another banger of an episode for you today. We're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff, but first let's just kind of catch up. Kyrun, how has your week been? How you feeling? How you doing? How are you kicking ass this week?
I am doing so well. I've never done better in my life. Everything just seems to be going so well for me. I just can't.
Are you okay?
Hey, I'm here now. Hey, sorry.
You sound. Oh, geez, yeah. You sound. Wait. Who am I talking to?
Sorry, it's me. It's Andrew. I may have been out.
Oh.
I may have gotten COVID.
Oh, I was telling everybody you're just on assignment
With COVID, right?
with COVID. Yeah, Andrew, we're going to need this by Thursday if you can get this done.
No, it's just one of those things where I was like sitting around one day and I was like, man, I don't feel good.
Yeah.
And I took my temperature. It was like, oh, it's a little bit high. I'm like, uh-oh. So I did the nose stuff.
Yeah. Always fun.
And I had some weird, shitty COVID tests, which I didn't like, but they said, oh, wait 30 minutes. So I'm like, okay. Did the nose stuff, put it in the magic goop, did the thing, and I like set my timer, and it's like I'm setting my timer. I'm watching the little test, and it's like, oh, the little T fades into view. I'm like, oh wow, 30 seconds in, and here I am already being told I have COVID.
Oh, or you're pregnant.
With COVID, yeah.
There we go. So you have a bouncing baby COVID.
Yeah,
and
so I've been out. I also love the fact that one of our listeners, a friend of mine, messaged me like, man, why'd you miss the podcast? I said, like, dude, I had COVID. He's like, oh, right. You already told me that. Yeah, it was, again, it's my number 2 time.
Oh, congratulations. High five. How was it in the general sense compared to the symptoms and just experience compared to the first time?
Actually, overall, lesser. Like, I still had like a rough, really the night I tested was like, oof. The next day, like I had fatigue and stuff, but I think the first time I had it, I was actually wrecked the first day. Now I was like, I didn't feel great and I was tired, whatever, but it was not, I never felt like totally disabled. And honestly, actually, as someone who's had like 72 vaccines or whatever, like 4, right. What are we at, 4?
I think so.
I had all of them.
Nice. So
for me, I tested positive on a Sunday, had a rough Sunday night. The joke is when I tested positive, my body was like, oh, hey, fucker, now you know. And then was like, burp. And like, oh, I feel like shit. Like that Sunday night, I went to bed at like 8. I was like, oh, I feel like death.
That's called a regular night for Dan Bethel.
Monday I felt bad, but okay-ish. Mm-hmm. And then Tuesday I started to feel better, and it was kind of like mostly fatigue after that. Whereas I think originally I had like one day where I was like, no, I'm never getting out of bed. And the second day I'm like, I might get out of bed. So definitely I'd say this time better than the first.
Yeah. Well, yeah, better with quotes around it.
Oh, it's still bad. Like I was not, obviously I didn't get hospitalized. I didn't have trouble breathing.
Right.
But I don't recommend people go and get COVID, right?
No, thank you, modern medicine.
It's bad. It's a bad disease. But I had it. I survived. I'm still alive.
You know, I was started getting suspicious, you know, because you said like you'd gotten all the vaccines and the boosters and whatnot. But I was really suspicious when they changed them over from those vaccine like certificate cards into just punch cards. And if you look, this might have explained why you got it. On the 7th one, you get a free COVID.
Right.
And so that could have been your problem. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, it was an experience. So here I am.
I'm glad you're better. I'm glad you're feeling good. Possibly you could have actually recorded last week, but it's better just to like rest and get better because it's I'm not going to say it's scary. It's at the point where it's just like it's a nuisance. But you know what? There's no better reason to just relax than when you're sick. So
yeah, oh, of course. And the one thing I will say, this is like a fun story, which I guess becomes my weekend sick.
Please tell me, Andrew, if you don't mind starting, what was your weekend sick like?
Actually, I'd already been doing this. I started watching Magnum PI, the new show that was on CBS and now on, I guess, or like eventually on NBC. But I started watching it. I think they had 5 seasons. I think it's now over.
God, really?
Yeah.
5 seasons?
Yeah.
I still feel like that's like a show they just announced last year. But okay, here we go.
So what happened is I've actually historically, I think I may have even talked about it. I watched the pilot or the first episode years ago. And then I always kind of like wanted to watch it because like, oh, okay, I'll watch it. But despite having a subscription to CBS All Access / Paramount Plus, they only ever had the current season. And apparently that's due to the weird way that the show is licensed. And about, I guess, 6 to 8 months ago, there's now a place where you can watch all of the old stuff, the first 4 seasons, on Tubi.
Oh yeah,
Amazon's
commercials, right?
Yeah, Amazon's free with commercials. Let's put a little.
Isn't that just television at this point? But sure, yeah.
Right. It's just television. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna finally watch this. So I watched it, and now I'm actually to the point where I'm in the 5th season, which is on Peacock, which I have a subscription to. I love the fact that actually when I got to the end of the 4th season, I'm like, oh, I have to switch to Peacock. I boot up Peacock, and it's like you have 16 days left. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Oh, because it's leaving Peacock to go to Tubi. I'm like, what the? Anyway, so I have thoughts I want to talk about, and they're not about what you think.
So how deep did you get?
Oh, I'm in the 5th season.
Okay.
No, I've watched the whole show. First of all,
okay.
I will say I like the cast. I like the show-ish,
okay.
Which I'll address. I think actually the cast is actually great. The one thing I will complain about, Jay Hernandez, who plays Magnum, he's fine. He's good, but for some reason he doesn't have quite the charm that Tom Selleck had.
Or
like
the
he
mustache?
just he doesn't have like whatever it was. Tom Selleck, like especially at that point in his career, he just had like he exuded charm. Like, he really did. Watch anything from
all the chest hair,
like that era. He like whatever he did was like, oh yeah, okay, that's good. Whereas like Jay Hernandez, like he does, like I think he it's fine. Like it's not bad. It just he doesn't have quite. I'd actually argue that some of his co-stars have more of the like the Selleck-esque charm. Which the joke is that I would say in the original show, his Tom Selleck's co-stars didn't have that charm.
So they inverted it. He's surrounded by Selleck.
Right. And like that's just my take. Like as I watched the show, I realized like, wow, the other like the guy that plays Rick or TC or the woman that plays Higgins, like they to me are more compelling than their original, but also like I just like them more than Jay Hernandez. I mean, I like Jay. He's fine. Right. I'm not saying he's bad. It's just Tom Selleck sold that show. Like the idea that Tom Selleck is still a star, like still does shows, still does shit. Yeah. Like that's why, because he had some chutzpah, whatever you want to call it. I think it's just not quite there. That's fine.
I'm slightly ashamed. I'm not as well versed on my Selleck history. Was he a big name by the start of Magnum, or was it Magnum that really elevated Selleck
I believe Magnum was his big thing.
Okay.
That's my understanding, right?
Because he was supposed to be Dr. Jones, wasn't he?
Yeah. There's a hot second where he was going to be Indiana Jones. But I think that was before he was not huge yet.
Yeah, I want to even say, like, was it conflicting with his Magnum schedule?
I think that was actually. I think yes.
That aside, though, like, does it? Because as you've talked about on the show, you have watched a fair amount of the original Magnum PI. You are a fan. So, in terms of capturing what that show is about, or what you want a new show to have, in terms of what it needs to be actually Magnum PI, how well do you think it captures that, despite the misgivings you have with sort of the casting?
So I'm not in one again, not a misgiving. He's fine. Just But I would say is, and again, I don't consider myself an expert. I've only watched probably a season or two of the original, which went on for like 8 years. I'm actually always shocked when I'm like, oh damn, that show went on forever. Because it was popular, right? What shocked me actually was there's an episode where because it was part of the, I'm going to put this in quotes, the Lenko universe. I think Lenko. Basically the head writer / producer, he made basically 3 shows for CBS. Hawaii Five-0, Magnum, and Macgyver.
Right.
And they were ostensibly all in the same universe. Which I already talked about Macgyver. I watched it.
Yeah.
It actually, they had a crossover with Hawaii Five-0.
Really?
Yeah. And so Magnum also had a crossover with Hawaii Five-0. And that was the first time I watched an episode where I start the episodes like previously on Hawaii Five-0. I'm like, whoa, what the fuck? So I had to go boot up my Paramount Plus and watch this episode where it's like a Hawaii Five-0 episode with Magnum and Higgins and whatever. But what I realized is, and this is like it's not intended as a political commentary, but the idea that fucking cops are violent, man. Like,
at least in the Lenko verse.
Well, it's weird that we have this thing, we have to go, and like the cops put on body armor and have assault rifles and go do the thing. And I started to realize, like, wow, like when the cops show up in Magnum, actually one of the characters is Detective Gordon Katsumoto. Like, oftentimes he'll show up, like he wears a Hawaiian shirt and whatever, but he shows up like in body armor with a fucking assault rifle. Jeez. Like HPD, Honolulu or Hawaii Police, right? Like, you're like,
right.
And part of me started to think, like, I watched enough Magnum where I didn't see this level of violence.
Sure.
And then actually part of me wants, like, I kind of like it then put a brainworm in me where I'm like, wait, Hawaii Five-0, my father watched that, like probably in reruns. I remember it being, like dudes in suits with fucking revolvers saying, "Book 'em, Dano."
right.
So, like, I don't remember, like, in the one episode of Hawaii Five-0 I watched, the head of the Five-0 was a former Navy SEAL, and they were, like, nothing but big guns and body armor. I'm like, wow, it's weird that, and I get it's CBS, which is basically actually, probably all TV, but, like, CBS definitely has, do you like cops? Do you like cops with guns?
Right.
Right, because they have, like, the infinity of NCIS.
I mean, yeah, the big 3 networks are definitely kind of steeped in that tradition because of the popularity among certain gray hairs of procedurals, right?
Right. It's just a weird thing. Like, this is a reboot of the show in the 80s where, like, actually, like, no, man, the dude in the Hawaiian shirt and shorts just solved the problem.
A time period that is often criticized for having gregarious amounts of violence, right?
Right.
As well. And like, let's top it. Which is funny. Like, there's already the argument, just the real world argument that the police police organizations don't need, tanks.
Right.
But definitely not Honolulu's police department.
I
mean...
And again, I don't know. It's weird to see it where, like, and now I actually can't, as I'm trying to finish the show, watching the 5th season, like, I realize, like, how many episodes where, no, man, there's just cops with guns. It ends with cops with guns. And you're like, wow, there's a lot of, but apparently Hawaii is a very violent place. And it may be. I know the world is like upside down, everything's broken. It's weird to see a reboot of a show where it still does some of the hashtag fun detective shit, but there's also this level of violence, of police violence, that wasn't there before. And actually, honestly, if I wouldn't actually start rewatching Magnum, it's probably all violence. Like,
sure.
It's probably like, because that's how cop shows sell, right? Like you have, oh man, the crimes are so violent, so the police have to be violent. You're like, oh, okay. It's such a weird thing for me to be like watching and being like, God damn, this is like, it's visceral.
So knowing you're at this important crossroads in terms of your own neuroses and your own values. Because I know you do like continuities and crossovers and stuff like that, which I'm sure there's an impulse you're like, well, now I need to go watch all of Hawaii Five-0, which I also just learned. One, I still think of that as a new show. That is 10 seasons.
10 seasons.
What the fuck? And then there's the other side of you're like, I don't want to watch stuff like, I don't want to watch militarized police. That's not entertaining to me.
Right.
So like, where do you kind of fall on that?
Oh, I don't want to watch that. Don't get me wrong, it might be a good show.
Sure.
But it's like, I used to, like, years and years ago, long before we did this, I watched, 20 seasons of CSI.
Right. Because 10 years ago, you were 74 years old.
Yeah. Because there was the original Miami, and I watched them all because I was in the Navy and sad. And now, like, when I watched the new one, which I talked about, like, I was like, wow, these cops.
It could be interesting. I wonder with Hawaii Five-0, since it's been on for so damn long, apparently, I wonder if it maybe didn't even start that as hardcore as maybe it has grown to be. As things have become divided and, more militarized.
The thing for me that, like, sticks in my head, which, I didn't actually watch the original Hawaii Five-0 or... but the idea that like cop shows in the forever ago was, again, just like guys in suits who, had a revolver and like did their thing. Now cop shows are like, militarized guys in body armor, who go and raid terrorist cells and shit, it's such a weird contrast. And I get that that's actually how the world has changed, but I like how much of it is, and again, I don't want to be weird, but how much of it is that we now expect that, and that's why it is. Like, TV taught us that, yes, and again, there's some sort of like post 9/11, like, all cops have to fight terrorists now,
right? Right.
But it's just weird because the idea that these shows that used to just have, I've talked about how I'm also watching Murder, She Wrote. Mm-hmm. And guess what? You know what never happens in Murder, She Wrote? Fucking cops in tactical armor with assault rifles breaking into a house to arrest someone. That has not happened in a single episode.
But again,
I've watched
the 80s, right?
Again, the 80s. But you imagine if someone did a reboot of Murder, She Wrote, that'd be the end of every episode.
She's Jessica Fletcher's putting on. She's like, oh, gotta load this vest full of ceramic plates to make sure.
Right, like they're like, all right, Jessica, do you want the body armor? Like, honestly, yes, I could believe that because that's how it is now.
Part of me is also it reminds me of kind of the change in design of comic book like superheroes over the last 20 years, where basically. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, mostly in the 60s and 70s and early 80s, they're basically just naked bodies with lines drawn on them to indicate clothing.
Right.
But as the sort of need for grittiness and as people started introducing more quote unquote mature, serious, grounded stories into comics, that also a lot of people felt that needed to be represented in the art as well. And so instead of just like boots that look like socks, we started seeing, rubber soles with like the little divots carved out. We started seeing buckles and belts and creases in the pants and stuff like that, where I wonder if there's a part of that going on here. Where it's like there's an expectation of quote unquote gritty realism.
Yeah,
because that's what entertaining is now. That's what entertainment is now to a large extent. So, but not to discount what you also said. Like I think, all of the above, right, is happening at once. To Hawaii 5-0 and Magnum PI.
So yeah, I don't. It is. Yeah, this is again not intended to be like some sort of like commentary on television or whatever. It's just it is a commentary on television. I'm not trying to like. It's just weird to like see this very different perspective on how this show, which should just be like a hashtag fun reboot, like wow, suddenly like there's a lot more like cop violence and. Yeah, I like
fun.
I guess it was that for me being with COVID, like I'm gonna watch the show, and I probably I started watching it before I had COVID. I burned through a lot of it while I was just like, I'm stuck in my little box, being isolated with COVID. I watched a lot of this show, and while I enjoyed it, that was always the thing that sat in the back of my head. And there's other things I could talk about, like like the idea of the change on how veterans are perceived.
Yes,
because in the original series, Magnum and his friends were all Vietnam veterans.
Right.
Where now they're all Afghanistan, Iraq veterans. And just the way it's different, which I actually like the fact that they introduced some new characters that like they introduced in the first season, basically TC and Rick, which are Magnum's friends. They meet a veteran that he's in a wheelchair, an army vet that lost the ability to use his legs, and they're like, hey man, let's hang out, whatever. He tries to kill himself in his first episode. But they convince him not to, and he actually becomes not a regular but a semi-regular. Right? I thought that was cool. Like, and he actually to the point where he's now flying helicopters by the end of the show.
Oh wow!
Right. Similarly, the other thing I really like is they're much more respectful of Hawaii.
That's an interesting point.
Like in the like 5th or 6th episode, they introduce. Oh no! Actually, there's this big estate that this person has. There's a cultural coordinator who's basically like an older, she's essentially an older Hawaiian woman, and she's a regular. Like she becomes and there are episodes about the B plot is like a construction company finds an old Hawaiian thing, and she gets called out to assess it. And then, there's one where it's her protesting, basically sleeping by an old Hawaiian cultural artifact, like a burial ground or whatever. And that's the whole B plot, is her we can't let the construction company do this. That's really love that how much the new show kind of tries to incorporate Hawaii as not just a place where white people go.
It was a very problematic introduction as a state. Let's not.
Right. Yeah. Everything about Hawaii, Hawaii has had some history that Americans and people that dole pineapples should feel real bad about.
Right.
Right. So I like the fact that they're trying to. That was another thing they leaned into. I like that.
Which is cool. I'm really enjoying how much Indigenous Americans are getting sort of front and center on big TV or big productions with this, with Reservation Dogs, with Echo. It's just and in film, right? I mean, it's not a happy movie, but Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah.
Finally, these stories are being told because they are part of the American story, and they're not always happy, but they need to be heard.
Yeah.
This is the first time I ever thought I'd say this. Magnum PI sounds like a complicated show.
Yeah.
Better than my COVID brain, which is I want to watch 90s mech anime. So I watched a bunch of Gundam. And,
that's fine.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. So. I fucking watched Magnum. Like you're not worse than me.
I mean, and Gundam is all about just the despair of endless military combat. So,
which apparently is also Magnum.
Yeah, there you go. No, that's what we need in Magnum. He needs a mech and a mustache, or a mech with a mustache. Get on that, CBS/NBC/ whoever the hell owns that show now.
Well, it may, like if they do a 6th season, which they probably won't, but if they do, it's going to be Amazon on Tubi. Also,
sure,
actually, speaking of which, now transitioning away from whatever I just talked about, watching a show on Tubi. Which is Amazon's. It used to be IMDb.tv, I think.
Right.
So I think I talked about watching Leverage Redemption, where the joke was the commercials were weird. That always felt mistargeted. Now, like they feel more like commercials, like old TV. But the weird thing is that I swear to God, half of them are either a commercial for an Amazon product, or a commercial for a product. Like a normal product, and then a QR code says order on Amazon shows up on the screen.
Terrible, but genius.
Boy, oh boy, do I have feelings about like, wait a second. So
now you've got a house full of paper towels that you never knew you needed.
Right, like, but think about that. Like the company that's showing you the TV also sells the gadgets they're advertising and also is the shipper and provider for the other products that you want to order.
Isn't that the dream?
Boy, oh boy, is America working great. Yeah, it was just so weird to see the QR code, order on Amazon now. For like, whatever, frozen vegetables or some shit. I was like, well, big yikes.
So yeah, sounds like you had a very educational convalescence.
So that was my COVID experience, and that's a show, friends.
Basically, the one I want to talk about, I think will just lead into more serious conversation. So instead of talking about Echo, which the short of it is an incredible show, one of my favorite Marvel things ever, I will drop this. And there's not a lot to talk about because I'm not deep in it at all, but this is something Andrew has experience with. I actually finally started playing Sea of Stars.
Oh,
it's awesome.
Yeah.
They get it, and I think the biggest thing that I'm kind of I'm still reeling from in these early hours. I think I'm maybe like 6 hours into it. I might be overestimating there. Is that I played the hell out of this company's Sabotage Studios, I believe, their previous game, The Messenger, and boy, is this not that in any shape or form aside from being a sprite-based game. It is incredible how different this is. This is like the biggest love letter to Chrono Trigger I have ever experienced. I think they even got one of the composers to work on it from Chrono Trigger.
What I will tell you though, there was a point for me where, like, knowing that, like, I played Messenger. Mm-hmm. There's a point where it's like, go to this stage or whatever, like this realm or this area where suddenly the music started playing, and like, fuck, I've heard this before.
Awesome.
And it was basically a stage from The Messenger, and I was like, oh shit, I forget that this is a thing.
That's great. I'm looking forward to it.
And there's also a point at the end, like in the very, very end, where they actually have just a straight up like messenger thing where it's like, oh, you didn't forget about this, right? It's like, oh, okay. But yeah, it was definitely for me just that scene where, because I think the idea is that this is essentially the same world as Messenger, but it's pretty like mild. But there's at least one point where it's like, oh no, this is just that place in that world. Like this is that stage of Messenger, but you're now exploring it. Yeah, no, it's a blast. The characters are charming. It doesn't despite being obviously very much rooted in terms of gameplay and structure and in like a Japanese role-playing game style, turn-based stuff. It's snappy. It gets you right in there. It's always moving forward. It's these guys know how to make games, and very much enjoying it. And it's, would you say, worth playing all the way through? Like it's... Oh, absolutely. Okay. Because I will say, I have fallen off Dave the Diver wholeheartedly. I'm kind of like done with it.
I didn't finish it. I don't know. I just felt like felt like a little one note, and the joke stopped being funny for me after a while. So I don't know.
Well, where'd you fall off? Like, did you finish the?
I was still in pursuit, like going like the frozen underwater train thing. I'm like,
because I found the same thing when I essentially finished the story, but not the game.
Yeah.
I also dropped off the first time, and for the second time, I didn't even make it that far. Whereas I'd say with Sea of Stars, what I would say is that there are actually absolutely 2 endings.
Okay.
And basically, you'll play the game, and you'll finish it, and it will tell you. It will tell you like, hey,
create a separate save file here.
No, just like, hey, you're not done.
Okay.
Right. You'll go through what feels like the end of the game, and you'll be like, but hey, you're not done. Keep playing. Because there's a thing, and you'll see it when you get there. Sure. It was an experience that.
I'm guessing it's not terribly long. It's not like the classic Japanese role playing. Like this is 80
it's
hours.
Not like 80. No, I mean, I don't want to boot up my Steam to see how long I played it. Steam tells me I played it for 46.9.
Okay.
So that's probably like finishing the first ending and then being told, hey, there's a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. No, definitely. I loved it. They do some big heart pulls, which I liked. My
man Garo.
Yeah,
he's a beast.
Such a game. I enjoyed it. Had a good time. I do recommend it for anyone that likes the genre. It's a JRPG done by Canadians. You know,
naturally,
right?
It is like the traditional turn-based RPG, but I'm not going to say they introduced, but they tweak the mechanics a bit, so the combat is engaging. It's not just you hitting a menu button over and over and over again, although you kind of are. It introduces, or doesn't introduce, it uses the mechanic, I think, at least in console things, introduced by Super Mario RPG, where there's timing aspect. If you tell a character to attack and you hit a button right before they connect with the villain, you can do some extra damage or do a second hit or something like that. And let's do the same with blocking damage and the combo mechanics that are borrowed from, Chrono Trigger. It's very fun. And it's always, like I said, it's really snappy. That unlike the Japanese role-playing game tendency to kind of draw things out, slow things down, this has always got you moving. And it's written very well, and the music is incredible. And it looks gorgeous. It's great.
Yeah, and I would say, for me, the fact that I was able to finish it in 46 hours and have such a good experience that I recommend it to others, right?
This game is worth wasting your time.
Yes.
So if you, dear listeners, have any comments about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page with this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can find us on other social media as well, specifically the places that we frequent, which means you can find me on Instagram at dbethelcomics. You can find Andrew on Mastodon at profounddark at dice.camp.
While you're on our website, forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you may already be on because you're listening to us on YouTube. In any case, if you do like YouTube and you listen to us, like and subscribe, or as the kids like to say, ring that bell.
We use 2 tracks of music for the show. One is called Disco Medusi, the other is called District 4, both written and performed by Kevin MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to leave some sort of review. Whether a text review or using the proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. I want to end on a promise long overdue.
Okay.
To our dear listeners. And God, it's been so long you might have actually forgotten. But Andrew, we need a sausage update. How did they turn out? So last time we talked about the sausage.
Oh, shit. Have we
The
not
last
done
thing
that?
where you'd left off was that you had made the sausage. You had not taken the sausage. You had not received the sausage.
So
You weren't even sure how much sausage they were going to give you. But you knew sausage was coming.
I made the Kartoffelwurst for a local venue. Anyone that listens
For them,
to this
so like
knows.
for them, like to sell. You help.
Yeah, they
you
did.
help
Yeah,
make their inventory. Okay.
Yeah, people ate my sausage.
Strangers ate your sausage.
Strangers ate my sausage. So I brought some home. It was actually relatively popular at the establishment. Also, I brought some home, both unstuffed and stuffed.
Okay. Might need to explain that a little bit.
Sausage packed in casing and then smoked.
Gotcha.
So I brought some of those home. I also brought some that was like basically the. So
You brought
for those that
some?
know, I brought some. For those that don't know, sausage is just meat stuff in a casing, usually intestine of an animal, and then oftentimes or sometimes smoked or kind of pre-cooked. Although you actually can get raw sausage,
Yeah, you can.
which is just the Jesus Christ. It's just the meat packed in the casing.
Yeah.
So I had both the uncooked stuffing essentially.
Yes.
And
It almost
also,
kind of look like ground beef. I'm guessing, like
so,
just
yeah,
kind of like
basically just like ground pork. Right?
Yes, right.
So I had like some of that. I also had some actual sausage. Had cooked and ate all that good stuff. Actually, I really, although it wasn't my recipe, I actually really enjoyed it, and I like
Nice.
the fact that like, oh, I made this. I made
Yeah.
this to the point where actually I'm now, I kind of have been getting into the idea of making my own sausage.
Oh,
Although probably not stuffing and smoking because I don't have a smoker and I
No.
don't have a
and it might not be
Stuffer.
legal for you to solicit your own sausage.
right. So it's
For money.
but yeah, just to I think the biggest turn for me was the idea that sausage was not as mysterious as I thought. Right, like yeah, guess what? What's in the meat tube is not weird. You can make it at home.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, so now I am.
You can't talk about this.
And boy, oh boy, is this episode ending like a porn.
Like we always put the explicit tag on our shows because we
boy, oh
cuss
boy.
like sailors, but this
boy,
is
oh boy, is it now appropriate?
usually it's just language. Now we have suggestive content.
I
mean, hey, maybe we get in demand enough, you could just quit your job and get good enough to just permanently offer your sausage to anyone that wants it
yeah. Well, that's
as a career.
I don't think the demand will ever be there.
Oh.
Or
So until-
the money.
So until people demand your sausage, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel,
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
and for all intents and purposes,
That was a podcast. I probably want to buy a stand mixer with a grinder, so I can grind my own.
a grinder you can just get for free on your phone.
I thought that was an app for
Hey,
sausage.
what you could, you could open up that ask. You could open that app and ask, where can I get some sausage?
I do.
You will get answers.
Weirdly enough, the results I get are not what I expect.
No. All right, we can stop recording. We got all that on record.
Oh, no, yeah. Thanks.
I'm just like, ooh, I am not a young buck no more. I can't stay up late playing JRPGs all night. I got a JOB, not a JRPG.
If you wanted to use Audacity on a more regular basis, maybe something to investigate. But
Yeah.
It's fine for our purposes, for all intents and purposes. Ding.
You Apple people, you think you're so just...
You Google PC people think you're so high and mighty.
Well, we really are, actually.
Well, see, there you go. Dang, that was some good reverberation.
Thank you.
Props to the acoustics in your household. You're listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion.
That was awesome.
That was, then I tripped. It's like when you're walking down the sidewalk and you trip over nothing. That's what that was.
I've never done that before.
Oh, yeah, because you're so fucking cool. I get it.
Well, because, I have martial arts training, so I trip and I just roll back
you
into...
just do a flip. Yeah. I just tripped into a dragon punch.
Yeah.
First time you can say anything about you is short.
That's not the first time, actually.
Ha! Oh, why are you crying?
Welcome to a Dustcast.
Attachment point is the name of is a Black Ops government military maneuver.
No, it's a sex thing, actually.
Oh, that too.
Yeah, sorry.
The old attachment point.
Sorry. I thought you knew that. Hot pause.
Hot pausing, hot pausing, hot pausing for Glenn Cuddle Talk. Hot pausing is provided by your one and only Glenn. Here to snow you until you die.